Ready to level up your career? Text DISH to 44043 now to dive into a world of exciting technician opportunities at DISH. From cutting-edge technology to a supportive work environment, DISH offers the perfect platform for your success. Connect with us today to discover how you can be part of a dynamic team driving innovation. Connect today and join the DISH family, where innovation meets opportunity. Text DISH to 44043 to kickstart your journey towards a rewarding career.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Hey guys, before we get into the episode, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Paragons of Earth, the exciting new superhero comic I'm working on with Thomas DJ and Eric Johns. For this comic, we've unearthed a number of obscure and forgotten Golden Age superheroes, plucked them from the depths of the public domain, and completely redesigned and reinvented them for the modern day. It's an exciting cast of characters, and we're throwing them up against the threat of a Lovecraftian apocalypse. It's got action, it's got drama, it's got alternate dimensions and alien worlds, and it's even got a giant shark in a Hawaiian shirt. What else could you want? But in order to make this comic a reality, we need your help. The comic is crowdfunding now, and you can help support it by going to crowdfunder.com/paragonscomic. That's crowdfunder without the e.com/paragonscomic. You'll be able to find that link in the show notes, so please double check if you didn't quite get it. Please help make this comic a reality. We are counting on your support. And now, on with the show.
Evening, ma'am. Didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I'm glad to have a chance to thank you.
Just doing my job. No thanks necessary, miss.
No, it is. You saved my life. You saved all of our lives. That was a very... Hal?
Miss?
Hal? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god, Hal!
How did you know it was me?
What do you mean? I've known you my whole life. I've seen you naked. You don't think I would recognize you because I can't see your cheekbones? What is this? Why is your skin green? Why are you glowing? What the hell is with that mask?
Came with the outfit. Cool, huh?
So it all works because of this magic ring?
No, there's no such thing as magic. Intergalactic Green Peacekeepers, thousands of them, but no. I'm not making it up.
Wow. Ugh, I mean, when we were kids, who'd have thought?
I did, actually. I called this early on. I said one day I'll be a green space cop. Here I am.
Okay, so at the party, how did you make that big green ramp thing?
Anything I see in my mind, I can create. I just have to focus.
Anything?
Anything. Happy birthday. Better late than never.
Okay, so how does it work? They just, call you on your cell, cat in a tree, downtown Milky Way?
No, I don't think it works exactly like that. Well, technically speaking, I actually sort of quit.
What do you mean? How?
Well, I mean, it's a lot like quitting anything else, really.
I don't understand. How do you walk away from something like that? Is that even possible?
Well, I think we both know I'm pretty good at walking away.
If for once you didn't quit something you cared about, what's the worst that could happen?
Flipping that page.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles Podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming a new guest today, and that is Ralph Puma. Ralph, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to dig into this film.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. I've been listening to you for a while whenever you appear on our mutual friend Anthony's Digging for Kryptonite show, and always enjoyed your interactions on there and the Grant Morrison commentary you've done before. So looking forward to talking with you here about this movie today.
Yeah, Anthony and I have known each other for years. We used to work together at Alternate. That's how we met. And then from there, just a friendship developed, and he used my music in a movie of his. So it was really him podcasting was just a natural progression in his like artistic endeavors. And I'm just lucky to be a part of it every now and then.
Yeah. Well, it's a great show. Your appearances are always a treat. I'm hoping that you and Mike, I'm blanking on his last name, but
San Gregorio.
Yes. I would love to see you two do a Grant Morrison deep dive podcast at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to do that with him too. Him and I always bother Anthony. We have a small group chat, just the three of us, and we're always pestering him. When are we going to do the Invisibles? When are we going to do this?
There is an Invisibles podcast, but it's been dormant for years. So definitely, I would love for someone to jump into that. I did my own dip into the Grant Morrison podcasting realm a few years back with New X-Men. So I've already,
nice.
Yeah, it was a fun experience going back through that.
That's awesome.
But before we jump too much into the movie, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ralph Puma. I'm primarily a musician. I was in a punk band for most of my life, and now I just kind of release singles and make music as, time allows. I'm a filmmaker as well. I created a show about a comic book store. It's called Solace. You can find it on YouTube. I'm currently re-editing it into a feature. So for the 10-year anniversary of it being released next year, hopefully I'll have it all cut together into like a cohesive, like hour and a half long kind of feature. And we'll maybe see what we can do with that.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a time frame on when you're hoping that'll be released?
We started filming in like July of 2014. So if I can hit it for July 2014 to do that, that'd be fantastic. But I don't want to put any deadlines on it because I've still got, I think, 80 hours of footage to go through.
Yeah, I know how deadlines work with being an author. There's been stuff I've been promising that was supposed to come out and has not yet come out. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you worked at a comic book store with Anthony, but how did you get into superheroes in the first place?
All right. So apparently this is the way my mom told it to me, but I'll tell like her perspective leading into my perspective, which was in like first or second grade. I wasn't really like interested in any of the books being offered at that time. I was either reading ahead or I was bored by what was available. And so we kind of wandered into this convenience store. And on the rack, she just basically was like, pick something. And so I pulled a Spider-Man comic and a Green Lantern comic. And those were kind of my first two. And it was Kyle Rayner Green Lantern with like the introduction of the character Fatality. And the Ben Reilly when he had taken over for Peter when he was in the hospital. So those were kind of my first two introductions to comic books in the first place. And then I was hooked. What really like made me latch on to Green Lantern was I was wandering one of like the, like how the malls sometimes have like the flea markets where everybody sets up like their like cards and their comic books. I was wandering through a flea market in the Cross County Mall, and this guy had a array of all of the Total Justice action figure.
Oh, I remember those.
Yeah. And so those were cool, and I had known those, and obviously Batman and Superman. They like, to me, it was almost like I knew who those characters were from movies beforehand, but there was a Parallax action figure, a Hal Jordan Parallax action figure, and I was like, wait, that's Green Lantern. And the guy there was like, no, it's not. And I was like, no, that's Green Lantern. He's got the symbol, and it's like, and he's like, no, he's a bad guy. And I was like, wait, what? And I remember just like being like, wait, explain this. And that whole concept of like Hal's journey and descent into madness. I don't know why. It was like, you know how like kids latch on to like Venom because he's so terrifying that like he's like this wonderful character to get into because he's so scary, but he's kind of funny and he's kind of interesting, but he's accessible to children. He's not too scary that he doesn't scare them away. It was something like that about Parallax that like completely enthralled me with the Green Lantern universe, and I wanted to learn more about all of that.
Awesome, cool. So yeah, I remember those Total Justice action figures. I was never a big DC guy growing up. I was always more into the Marvel side of things. But you know, I knew, you know, like you, Batman and Superman from the movies. They were as far back as my memory goes. I've always had Batman and Superman in my life. I've always had knowledge of them. But so I can remember when I was introduced to Spider-Man and the X-Men and all the Marvel characters, but I cannot remember the first time I was introduced to Batman and Superman. But I do remember those Total Justice action figures, and at first being drawn to them because it was billed as like the Batman Total Justice line.
Yeah.
And so you had Batman in there, you had Superman with the mullet back at the time, and then they also had like Green Lantern and Flash and Parallax, and yeah, I had all of those. And then later when they expanded the line, they brought in like Zariel. That I love that because I had gotten into Grant Morrison's JLA at the time too.
Yep.
And I think that was probably my first introduction to Green Lantern was those Total Justice action figures. So my first Green Lantern was Kyle Rayner in the realm of toys.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool.
So that's kind of how you got introduced. So have you tended to gravitate more towards Green Lantern pretty much the whole time you've been a comic book fan? Has your fandom remained pretty strong with him the whole time?
Yeah, I would say I even carried through the Jeff Johns stuff, even though I was more of a Kyle person. You know, Nightwing was pretty early on for me, so I kind of followed through any of the Nightwing, Bat Family stuff. Superman was kind of lost on me because when I started, it was that what Anthony was talking about with the Titans, where you could like stack the comics and it like built like the giant. So like Superman was almost lost to me entirely at that point because I couldn't get into those stories because it was that terrible arc.
Yeah.
And then but you know, X-Men, really I gravitated towards X-Men. I gravitated towards Spider-Man, and leading up to, I would say, Final Crisis, I kind of stuck with DC and Marvel. Once Final Crisis happened, it kind of felt like an ending to me. And it was almost like, all right, what else is out there? And that's when I started digging into like Walking Dead and Invincible, and I started branching out into much more because I was old enough to, you know, have my own funds. And so now I'm going through the comic book shop and I was like, this looks interesting and no one can tell me it's too mature for me. So it was like Invincible, Walking Dead, all of that kind of, you know, kept me into like the, you know, Image stuff. But I kept gravitating back towards Batman RIP and Final Crisis. And I didn't know why, because I, like a lot of people, had like almost this visceral reaction towards both of them. You know, Batman RIP is too convoluted. It doesn't make sense. Final Crisis, it's supposed to be this great event, but I don't really get it. But still, it somehow felt like an ending to me. So I kept going back to those books, and I was like, okay, who wrote these? Grant Morrison. What else did he write? Wait, what do you mean he wrote that Justice League run I loved when I was a child? Wait, what do you mean he wrote New X? So it was like, oh, I was starting to put together these pieces of like who this person was. And I then started exploring, you know, I started with Doom Patrol, and that was incredible. And I was like, I need more of this. And then that's what eventually led me to the Invisibles. And after I had read the Invisibles is when I heard him talk on Fat Man on Batman about his
I remember that episode.
Experience. Yeah. And I was just like, man, this guy, there's something there. And that also brought me into like studying and loving the occult. And it was just this
Mhm.
whole rabbit hole, like from Grant Morrison and comic books, that led me to pretty much everything I love and
Mhm.
how I behave as a human and move about within the world.
I'm guessing you've read Super Gods then as well too.
Yes,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
I loved that book. I devoured that like in one sitting pretty much because it was so
Same.
addictive. But yeah, Grant Morrison, I'd read some of their JLA stuff because it was like the big book at the time when I was reading Wizard back in the day, and
Mm,
so I'd read some stuff here and there of that, but then it was New X-Men that really got me into them, and then from there I branched out into ended up reading up the whole JLA stuff, and then branching out into Doom Patrol and then the Invisibles and their bat and yeah, like you like the Batman stuff and the Final Crisis stuff. At first, it was kind of lost on me, but over time, and through multiple readings, plus hearing other interpretations, such as the episode you did with you did the Final Crisis episode with
yeah,
Anthony.
one of
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah, and that gave me a whole new perspective on those comics, and just going back and rereading them now, I'm just like, it's it's one of those books that just it rewards so multiple readings of it. Even stuff like Marvel Boy, like it's just like this one little mini series they did back in the day, and going back and rereading it now with like all the corporate stuff going on, it rings so much more relevant than it. Even New X-Men reads so much more relevant now than it did at the time.
Yeah, they have a way of their foresight
Mm.
into the direction that industry and the direction that society moves is really, they're really onto something. And I think
Mhm.
it's their love of Robert Anton Wilson and
Yeah,
his
yeah.
kind of thought processes that get them to that place.
Absolutely. Yes. So what kind of stuff are you interested in lately? What's kind of been grabbing your attention these days?
I've been actually going down a Stephen King rabbit hole. I've loved Stephen King most of my life, loves his movies, loves some of his books, but I'm kind of doing it all in order for the first time. I'm just kind of listening to audiobooks on long walks, and kind of that's been keeping me company. I've got Luda coming up, though, which is Grant Morrison's new book that I haven't checked out yet. So that's
Oh,
on
I didn't
my,
even hear about that.
yeah, it's like it's about a drag queen who like brings someone into the occult. So I'm like all about it.
Is that a comic or is that a prose?
It's a prose novel.
Oh, okay, okay, interesting.
Yeah,
I'll have to keep my
came
eye
out
out for
about
that.
like 2 years ago.
Oh,
But
wow. Okay.
I kind of gravitate more towards audiobooks because I can
Hmm.
digest them
Yeah.
so much quicker listening on like two times speed and all of that.
Right. Yeah. 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 I do that with nonfiction books a lot.
Yeah, same.
Um, yeah, for me, I think what I've been into, it's tough. I've had so little time these days because I've had like marathon podcast recording sessions. So most of the stuff I've been watching has been for this show and the other show I do, Japan on Film. So I haven't had a whole lot of time to dive into stuff just for pure enjoyment. But I have just like the past few days, I started reading Batman Beyond the White Knight. So it's
Oh, nice.
the third, or I mean, I know he did the Harley Quinn one too. So I guess that was like 2.5 or something. But this is like the third major volume in the series, and I loved the first two, like White Knight and Curse the White Knight. So when I saw this one had come out, I've been waiting for it to come on sale on Amazon, and then finally it came on sale like last week, so I bought it right away.
Nice.
Um,
I haven't dove into any of those, so I don't know what like that whole Elseworlds or that reality is.
it's really cool. It's an interesting. I mean, he does some interesting things too, just like with the changes he makes to the Bat family. Like for some reason, he has Jason being the first Robin and Dick being the second one, which is an interesting flip on the dynamic. Um, Also, Joker is actually Jack Napier, so he got that from the first movie. But he also incorporates like he's got the different Batmobiles, and he draws like all the different Batmobiles from the movies and the TV shows, and like the
Oh, that's
Batcave and
awesome.
stuff like that. So he mixes in all these different aspects from different interpretations of Batman over the years, and yeah, it's been a really interesting series, and it's really cool like reading it. And now in Beyond the White Knight, obviously he's brought in Terry McGinnis and Derek Powers, and tied Derek Powers into Batman's origin story in a way. So it's all been a pretty cool read. So I'm really been enjoying digging into that.
And it's all, correct me if I'm wrong, all Sean Murphy, right?
Yes, he's writing and he's doing the art, and his art style is amazing. Like I keep like whenever DC's announcing these new animated stuff, I'm just like, do the White Knight already. This would be so cool if you did this.
Yeah, Punk Rock Jesus is one of those. If I could ever direct something that was like I want to do Punk Rock Jesus so bad.
I've got to read that. I read descriptions of it, and it sounds really cool. I wasn't aware that was Murphy though.
Yeah,
so that's
really
another
cool.
reason why I definitely have to pick that up. Okay, so we hinted at this earlier, but today the movie we're talking about is the much maligned 2011 Green Lantern film, starring Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan and directed by Martin Campbell. And surprisingly, Greg Berlanti had wrote the script for this. I didn't realize that until just now. And it's kind of funny going back and seeing this and seeing how far Greg Berlanti's come since this movie, this inauspicious beginning to his DC career, as far as I know, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking through all of that as well, and Martin Campbell's has some of my favorite movies in there as well, like the Zorro films and Casino Royale is so good.
He's probably the two best modern Bond films would be GoldenEye and Casino Royale, and he directed both of them.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what surprised me, because I was so looking forward to this movie. Even me, I'm not really a big Green Lantern fan. I never really caught on to Green Lantern in the comics. Most of my exposure to the character was through the Justice League stuff. And then, I had eventually read some stuff here and there. Like I read Emerald Twilight, I read Rebirth, and the I think it was the No Fear arc, that the first one he did after Rebirth. But that was pretty much it. Outside of the Justice League stuff, I was never that familiar with Green Lantern, but from what I had read, I had always leaned more towards Kyle as my Green Lantern. And Hal just never really interested me that much, but I love Ryan Reynolds and I love Martin Campbell. So when both of them were announced, I'm just like, okay, so this is probably a way that might get me interested in Hal Jordan. And it didn't quite work out that way.
Yeah. So just a side note, when I was 14, I had written out 6 movies to make a Green Lantern movie series. So I was very invested in Green Lantern becoming a film. And when it was announced, I was so excited because I was also a fan of Ryan Reynolds from Just Friends. And and I thought he would be a perfect way to give Hal some personality because, Hal Jordan, cocky, kind of conservative, and that's kind of all you kind of really get about Hal. And I think Ryan Reynolds would have added in a lot of interesting layers to the performance, and I was very excited, and all over my social media I was posting about it, and I was like, this is going to be the one. You thought you thought these movies were good, not Iron Man, but you thought these movies were good, but this is the superhero movie that's going to really show you what these films can do. And yeah, boy, was I disappointed at the time.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back about what I thought at the time, because I was already in Japan when this movie came out, so I don't think I even saw it in the theater, because especially back then, the superhero release schedule was usually 3 months or more behind America, and it wasn't until Avengers hit big that then they started releasing them almost same day as they do in America now.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I did not see this in the theater. I think I might have seen it on a a download of it or something. Originally, a pirated cam version or something was what I saw of it. And yeah, for the longest time I was trying to think oh, it's not too bad. I eventually bought it on DVD when it came out, and rewatched it a few times. I think I had told myself I liked it a lot more after I'd watched it. I think a big reason why was because of Ryan Reynolds, because I really wanted to like this movie at the time. I think I like you. I really liked Ryan Reynolds in Just Friends. My first introduction with him was Van Wilder. I've been looking forward to him playing Deadpool, and he's one of those actors that yeah, he plays kind of the same character in every single movie, but it's an endearing character. And like,
Yeah.
even if the movie's bad, it's still entertaining to watch him in it. So, um, I think I'd kind of convinced myself that, and also I'm also kind of one of those people who, when everybody says, "Oh, this movie's terrible," it's terrible. I'm kind of like, "Well, maybe there's some." I kind of like to play a little bit of a devil's advocate and be like, "No, there's some good stuff in it." So, um, and then when I was rewatching it for this episode, it was not that good. Like, it's. I'm not going to say it's a completely worthless movie. Like, it's not like Morbius level or anything like that. But it's got some good things in it. But overall, it's just kind of meh. It just kind of drags a lot, and the this we can talk about the CGI too, because I think that's also a weakness of this film in retrospect too. But what were some things you thought about it when you first saw it?
Yeah, so I was obsessed. I not like with the movie, but leading up to it, I was like
Mhm.
refreshing every day. I was like, "Oh my god, they cast Michael Clark Duncan!" And oh my god, like it was like super
Mhm.
nerding out. Every like bit of information, I was deep diving on like IGN, comic book movie, wherever I could find any info on this movie. I was like tracking it because this was something that, as a kid, I always dreamed that I was going to be the one to do it. So, but
Mhm.
obviously you get older and reality sets in and like, all right, at least I'm going to be able to be around when it exists and the movie is going to happen. So following it as crazily as I could, um, I had my first moment of panic when I saw the suit for the first time.
Mhm.
And I was like, this does not look good. Okay, but maybe it'll work on screen film.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm wrong. And then I saw like all the alien suits and I was like, okay, I see what they're doing. I see how it works. Great. Then I went to the theaters and I remember not feeling much of anything and
Mhm.
being like, well, this is the thing I love and they kind of did it, but it's nowhere near what it should have been.
Mhm.
And I think this time I watched the extended version for the first time. I don't, it was only a couple scenes here and there.
Yeah, from what I looked into seeing about the extended version because I'd heard that it was out there. But from the research I had done, it didn't seem like there were any real. It didn't seem like, when I heard there's an extended version, I was thinking, oh, maybe it's like a Daredevil situation where the extended version is actually much better than the
Yeah.
than the theatrical one. But when I'd done some research on it, most people that had talked about it said that, yeah, it's not really that much different.
No, it just adds in what should have been the beginning of the movie, which
Hmm.
is young Hal and exploring just a small bit of like his dynamic with Hector and young Carol and his father, and then him watching
Hmm.
what happened to his dad. So like that's really the crux of what is added.
Okay. And that doesn't even feel like it was really necessary because I thought that the what we got in the movie is established that pretty well in the
Yeah.
theatrical cut. So I didn't feel like there was anything. I mean, I think there is definitely stuff that you could have added in there. I mean, we could talk about the whole idea of throwing parallax into this movie and just like how I think that's one of the biggest problems with this movie is that they cram a way too much stuff into this one film too.
Yeah. I wanted to come in hot and really defend it because, I mean, you're getting a Ryan Reynolds, Taika Waititi film.
Hmm.
Like, that in and of itself should be like a selling point for people nowadays because of, everything Taika's done and Deadpool. And
Hmm.
it's kind of this early rumblings of like all of nerddom is kind of shoved into this film.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping that this next watch through I'd be able to fully like be able to be like, nope, I'm on board. I was wrong because I for the longest time, was kind of anti the X-Men and Raimi Spider-Man films,
Hmm.
but now I'm watching it with my 7-year-old stepson, and I'm like, oh, these movies are actually great. Like
Hmm.
they're like solid films. I don't know what was wrong with me, where maybe it was just like they're not exactly what I was looking for, but they're still like you actually get the X-Men, you actually get Spider-Man,
Hmm.
and you get the themes, and they're done really well.
Yeah.
So now going back to Green Lantern after having watched most of those again, I'm like, it's completely missing the mark because the themes aren't even there. The
Mm-hmm.
themes aren't even clear. And all of the stuff that I would have loved to have seen more of, they shove into a 10-minute sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I can't defend it as fervently as I would have liked to.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when you'd asked to come onto this. I'm just like, oh, Green Lantern, this would be good. I can, I get a chance to defend this movie because I think it's actually not as bad as people say. And while I think I still believe that to some extent, I don't think it's like I said, I don't think it's a completely terrible movie. It's got some moments in it, but I also after I watched it, I'm just like, yeah, I don't think I can really defend this a lot. There's some things I can defend, but there's a lot that just kind of misses the mark. But one thing you said in there, I'm curious about because me again, not being very big into Green Lantern, what would you say kind of are those major themes of the concept?
Um, obviously overcoming fear, right? So they talk about it a
Mm-hmm.
lot, but I don't think there's anything, you know, there's the moment where he's fighting Parallax and he's looking away and he's scared of him, but then he looks at him and he does the thing. And it's a powerful moment, but I don't think it like encapsulates like overcoming fear because his whole thing was getting over the fear of losing his father. And that
Mm-hmm.
kind of goes away. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? All of these things that they're seeding in the beginning of the film, just taking it as it is, not even thinking about the comic book itself, but just taking the film as it is. You set up that what happened with his father gave him fear, but you don't really resolve that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
He overcomes being afraid of, and running away, but it's not even really explained into why he's running away so much. It's
Yeah.
just there's nothing kind of ties together, and I felt that way about Hammond and Hal as well. They don't really, they're both coming from privilege, they're both kind of given, they're both following in their parents' footsteps, but one kind of feels like a loser,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's kind of their battle, and that's kind of not really.
Yeah. That.
Hammond is jealous of Hal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is something that you can absolutely play up, but I don't think there was enough moments where you see Hector seeing Hal from a distance and
Yeah.
feeling that.
Well, yeah. I mean, that scene at the party when they see each other and they start talking. I remember the first time watching it, kind of being a little bit surprised the fact that they know each other. Okay, this feels like it's kind of coming out of nowhere. And then they try and throw in the fact that they've got this backstory and they know each other. And yeah, maybe the extended edition makes that a little bit more clear, but it still felt like a pretty forced interaction. Not only that, but also I think credit to Hal too. Like when Hector's father comes in, he starts praising Hal. Like Hal kind of he's like indirectly trying to, throw some support Hector's way too. He's like, well, I couldn't do what I do without the smart guys building the planes in the first place and all this
Yeah,
kind of stuff. And there's just like zero acknowledgement from Hector at all. And I felt like there could have been something a little bit more to play with there at least.
absolutely. I was, because I don't think the performances are bad. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people say that the performances are bad, and some of Blake Lively's choices are questionable.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of like questionable choices, which aren't bad, once again, they're very big choices that she's making in certain scenes. Um, you also have Sarsgaard doing the most. Like he
Mm-hmm.
is like his screams in that are like Roger Rabbit, like the judge terrifying sometimes, but they're both huge. Like she's not giving like huge choices like that, but she is still making choices that are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody in this film does. I don't think any of the performances are bad, but I agree with you that the pacing is so bland
Mm-hmm.
and boring. I like remember, like I think it was right after the race car scene at the dinner party, and I like scrubbed for time and I was like, oh, there's an hour left.
I was thinking that too.
and so you like shove in all of this OA stuff really fast, right? You're
Mhm.
like boom, 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 and that's all the stuff that I would have loved to have seen more of. Like, give more training, show more
Mhm.
recruits coming in, because Green Lanterns are basically cannon fodder. All of these Green Lanterns are dying. Why isn't there a big recruitment happening?
Mhm.
Like, you know,
Well, I mean, yeah, that's what I think. The things I love the most about this is the stuff on Oa. I think that's when the film really kind of is firing on all cylinders. Like when Hal goes to Oa and he's meeting the other Green Lanterns, and he's training with Sinestro and Kilowog. I love those parts of the movie. I thought those are the best
yeah,
parts of the film, and it's just like, even yeah, the CGI is kind of wanky, but it's still that's still what I feel like. Everybody is actually having fun in those scenes, whereas the
yeah.
rest of the movie, it just feels like they're kind of going through the motions for the rest of it.
Yeah, I think that early on, I love the versus the AI air fight scene.
Mhm.
Like, there's something about that it just works. It brings you into the movie. The movie feels fast paced. Like, it has like a Top Gun kind of vibe. This
Mhm.
whole like opening of the film. I think you don't really need the beginning exposition. Like, who like we want to hear about the Guardians and
Mhm.
Sector 2814, but like, what audience goer is gonna like, you're starting with that?
Yeah, yeah. Especially, it's such a bad place to start, especially because my late co-host, he used to say that the opening image of a movie is like, the first scene in the movie. It really kind of sets the tone for the rest of the movie. And that that opening scene in that movie, it's this really terrible looking CGI creature that's attacking the Green Lantern. It's just like, yeah, when I was rewatching it last night, I was thinking about what he used to say about that. I'm like, yep, that really does kind of set the tone for this movie. You're going to get
Yeah,
this really kind of like cheesy looking CGI monster just rushing at you.
yeah, it's such a like, you have Hal, who is supposed to be this point of view character,
Hmm.
right? You should be following the story along with him. You started
Yes.
as a kid, you go into this, people don't know what to expect. Like, no one knows what Green Lantern is. This is an introduction to something completely new to
Hmm.
people. Everyone knows Batman, everyone knows Superman. This is before Guardians of the Galaxy. There's not been a good space superhero yet,
Hmm.
and you start with this just like 5-minute exposition dump.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm already out. Like, if I'm watching this and I'm like, all right, well, I guess this is that kind of sci-fi movie.
Hmm.
Like,
No, yeah, I think you're right about that dogfight sequence. I think you open up the movie with that. I mean, that's a killer opening. It gives you those, like you said, those Gun vibes. It gives you a sense of Hal as a character right from the start, without going like him waking up in bed with this random girl too. I thought that was kind of just kind of like unnecessary. Like, it wasn't that it was bad for his character. It just felt like I feel like there's a better way to get introduced to this guy.
yeah, I think you have this Top Gun. One of my friends always said that the only way to do Green Lantern right would be to do. Oh my god, I'm completely blanking on the film now, but it'll come back to me. Training Day. You do Training
Oh
Day,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's it. And you have a Green Lantern movie with just that.
That's an interesting way to do it. Yeah, because you've got Sinestro is kind of like the Denzel Washington character, and then yeah, and Hal is like the Ethan Hawke. That would definitely work. But I remember thinking about when you said Top Gun it too. I was remember thinking like, you know, back in the day, like, it would have been cool to see like Tom Cruise in like a Hal Jordan type of role, because that I think that would have fit back in his like Top Gun days. And
Absolutely.
if you'd done this kind of like a mix of Top Gun and Training Day, I think that would have been a really interesting route to take. Um, and it's so weird because you were talking about the cast too, and I was thinking about the cast too as I was watching this, and it's like, my God, this has got some amazing spot on casting. Like, you've got,
Yeah.
like we said, Ryan Reynolds as Hal. Like, I'm also like with you. Like, I've never felt that Hal had much of a personality. I know a lot of Green Lantern fans are probably gonna want to roast me alive for saying that, but that was just always kind of my impression of him. And you get Ryan Reynolds. It's very similar. You could have had a very similar thing like with the Downey as Tony Stark, and the Iron Man comparisons are so interesting because you could tell that DC wanted this to be their Iron Man movie.
Yeah.
And that is a good comparison because, like Tony, like you said, Hal is kind of like this cocky but but also very conservative character. That's also Tony Stark in the comics to a large extent too. And so what they do is they bring in Robert Downey Jr. He brings in this more, kind of snarky personality to it and makes him a little bit funnier, a little bit more endearing by doing that, as opposed to Tony in the comics, who is a much more dry, and he's not as entertaining to read about. And you could have had a very similar situation with Hal Jordan, where you'd have, Ryan Reynolds coming in. He can do cocky, sure, but he's got this endearing personality that, you don't hate him because he's cocky. And yeah, it's just weird how much they missed the mark on this role with that. Also, Bradley Cooper was another one who was up for the role too, who would have done a pretty good job in that too, or Chris Pine too.
Yeah, any of those.
And yeah, Blake Lively, she didn't impress me too much, but I think, like you said, that's probably more just because of the way her character is written, because this is very much like, I mean, the love interest gets kidnapped by the villain type of thing. That was old even before 2011. Like, by the time Spider-Man 3 came along, audiences were getting kind of tired of that trope. So
well, yeah, I remember, I think it was around the time of Thor: The Dark World where, Marvel had like a come to Jesus moment where they were like, maybe we don't have the same structure where the girl gets kidnapped and is not helpful.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I think it was right around like Thor: The Dark World where we saw that shift out of that story structure. And there's
Well, I think it was actually Iron Man 3, because that was when Pepper kind of like broke out and like kind of took over the climax of the film.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, and then you've got Peter Sarsgaard, Hector Hammond. Like you said, I thought he did a pretty good job again with what he was. Mark Strong, I think, is probably the MVP of this movie. He is great in this.
Yeah. The fact that I hope like we get like some of these, like, what they're doing with, the Marvel characters, and they're kind of bringing in, Hugh Jackman and things like that. I just hope that James Gunn, even though he's going all new, that we can like kind of pull Ryan Reynolds and Mark Strong in, maybe, because Mark Strong is so perfect for Sinestro.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could probably get Mark Strong. I think Ryan's probably pretty done with Green Lantern by this point. In fact, you had mentioned the Taika Waititi thing. Did you ever see the interview they did about Free Guy when the promotion?
No.
So they were doing this interview with like the other cast members of Free Guy, and Ryan Reynolds and Taika Waititi, they were talking about how it's like, yeah, this is we've been friends for a long time. This is the first time we've actually done a movie together. And the rest of the cast members like, wait, weren't you guys in another movie together a few years back? And Ryan and Taika were just like, no, can't remember. They're like, yeah, wasn't it Green Lantern or something? And Ryan's like, I have no, I don't remember that at all.
Man.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I wanted to talk about like where Ryan shines. Like that moment with his family is so good, where he like walks in and he has that hesitation, and then he's so like cavalier about it, and it all felt real, and it all felt like Hal. Like you have this big, Air Force moment. He gets fired or put under investigation, and then you have the family, and like all of that, like it's all tracking so far. Right. And even when he leaves the family, I don't care that he's like not sitting in the training simulator and that's where he gets pulled. I love that he gets pulled from his family, because you've now shown like what the stakes are for him. Right. He's got this loving family that like his brother's mad at him, not because, he wants to be mad. He's mad at him because he doesn't want his brother to die. He has a kid that cares about him, that's like hugs him and is scared for him, and his mother. You can see that there's all this stuff there. And then he gets pulled away to like join a space like police force, and like all of that tracks, and all of that can be followed. What, like, I don't know why it just loses me after that, because like suddenly Carol shows up and she's kind of fine with him because it kind of worked out, and then he's in an alleyway and he beats up the working class with the first thing he does with his powers.
The guys who lost their job because of him, no less.
Yeah. He grabs a fistful of like bolts and he's gonna hit them with them, and then he just Green Lantern fists them.
Well, I mean, it does kind of fit the conservative ethos of the character. If you screw the working class and then you beat up on them just for good measure.
Yeah, we're going back to the Denny O'Neil days of Hal. But like that's kind of where it starts to fall apart for me. But like, if in that moment, like the ring would have been like, you messed up, you have to report back to Oa. And so like he then gets sent back up, which right after that scene he does, and then he's faced with like the new world, and that's when the whole audience should have been introduced.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The fact that they introduced the Green Lanterns before that, and we saw like Sinestro talking with the Guardians, it loses that impact when Hal goes to Oa. Because yeah, you're right. The first time Hal sees Oa is the first time we should see it too. That should be all of our transitions into that new world.
Yeah. Because now you're faced. You've seen one alien that was humanoid, but now you're seeing a fish person. Like,
but also other characters too, like Angela Bassett. Like she's not my first choice for Amanda Waller. I think I don't like going with an actress as so fit for Amanda Waller, but at the same time too, like she's someone who's got the chops for that role, and she does a pretty good job with what she's doing. And even like we get those little brief teases of her origin from the comics with Cabrini Green and the death of her husband and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I love even Senator Hammond, like the father.
Tim Robbins, another great actor who gets into this. Like, there's so much talent in this. Jeffrey Rush as Tamar Ray, like you mentioned, Michael Clark Duncan as Kilowog, who is amazing.
Yeah, and then you get that 10-minute sequence on Oa, and every moment of that, I was like, this could be longer. And then it would like the Tomar Ray and Hal, that was great. And then like, all right, I need more. Oh wait, okay, now we're flying. All right, now we've introduced Kilowog. Okay, Kilowog beats him up for 5 minutes, and now he's getting beat up by Sinestro. And then Tomar Ray then explains, and that's where the exposition dump should have been.
Yeah. Also, too, the what was I going to say? I completely lost my train of thought there.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's my fault. Let's move on to something else. We'll probably the mask I wanted to talk about. Like, I don't know about you, but I couldn't understand why the need for Hal to get blue eyes, like these really ghostly looking blue eyes when his mask is on. Or I guess they're trying to kind of mimic the feel of like the white eyes from the comics, but it just felt very off-putting for me.
I agree with you about that. And especially when he does the oath for the first time. I remember I went back and rewatched it, and he does like this trance, right? And it's like it's being like sent to him by the ring, because the way that they explain it is, the ring, which could be a character in and of itself that could be talking to him, because it does do that in the comics. Like they take that aspect away, and so it looks like he's not of his own volition saying this.
Yeah, that bothered me as well.
And you're taking agency away from the character, which once again, like all action should be driven by character. And that felt like the action had dictated that the character has to say the thing because it's in the comic books, and they're going to say it now because they have to get it right so they can move on to the next scene.
Yeah. I mean, that was another thing that bothers me too every time I see this, because I'm like that oath. The whole purpose of an oath is that you are committing yourself to this idea. It loses that if the oath is done for you by this ring against your will, and that should have been something when the oath is explained to him on Oa or something like that. And it just the fact that they just did it that way to have a scene where Ryan Reynolds gets to make some, joke oaths type of thing but it sapped that scene of the weight it's supposed to have.
Yeah. Like I love that jokiness of it. I love the to infinity and beyond, and it's fun. And then like he clinks it, and then like from there it should have been like you hear it, right? Or like, in Brightest Day, where like it appears in like, green letters around it, and like or there could have been something visual or auditory that could have been done to guide it, versus it felt like it took away his agency.
Yeah.
And it should be something that he willingly wants to do. Now, there was a perfect moment, and I'm a screenwriter, so I keep doing all of these what ifs with this, and I'm sorry if that's...
No, that's totally fine.
He leaves Oa after he's beat up by Sinestro and is like, I'm not good enough for this. He should have been with Sinestro at that massacre.
That would have been
because
good. Yeah.
If he's at that massacre and you see people's like souls being dragged out of their bodies and flames and fire, like what happened to his father, and you relate this giant, smoke monster to the smoke and the fire that was around your father, like, then that's like, you have this visual, like, nope, can't do that. Gotta do, I'm not doing that. I just dealt with my family. I have to go back to them. Goodbye. And then like,
you know what? That's because the scene in the dogfight when he starts remembering his father, like I said, that dogfight scene is great, but the flashbacks and the way he freezes up like that, I felt that was kind of drawn out, and it felt a little bit out of place for that moment. And I think the way you're talking about, if he had like froze up or something in the plane, but we didn't see why, and then we get these hints about his father when his brother gets mad at him, and then if we then got the scene when like you said, like your idea of where him and Sinestro find the bodies, and then you get the flashbacks, I think that would have been so much more impactful.
Yeah, and it's like he almost seems like too much of a coward, right? He's not faced with the threat. He's not faced with the existential threat that drives him home.
No, it's just this is what I wanted to talk about. I remember this now, but it was the fact that he keeps quitting things. Like he quits the Corps, he quits Ferris Aircraft, and then later when he's having that when he's talking with Carol and he's telling her, he's like, no, I quit, and she's like, why don't you try not quitting something you're like this for once. And it's just like, I get the point the movie's trying to make, that he's quitting because he's afraid, but it doesn't do a good job of connecting those dots. And you're right. It just feels like, either he's a coward or he's just, way too much of a slacker, and or he's just too irresponsible to handle this stuff.
Yeah. So he goes back down, right? And then it's the party, as far as of the next big scenes. Yeah. Mind you, I'm like cutting out like the intercuts with Hector Hammond. I don't think they add anything. You know what I mean? It's not like they're parallel characters. It's not like they're equals. It's not like it's the Joker to his Batman and they're both being birthed at the same time.
Right.
But they were making those parallels with Hector Hammond. And like one is gaining good powers and one is becoming evil when he's getting the ring. And it's like, no, just focus on Hal getting the ring and then focus on Hector. And
it felt like they were trying to do something similar to, going back to Raimi's Spider-Man movies, like what they did in the first Spider-Man movie with like Peter and Norman getting their powers. But the thing that they did in Raimi's film is they did that really quickly. It was just like 1 or 2 scenes and that was it. It draws that out way too long.
Yeah, and then then he's in the bed struggling, and then he's in. I love the body horror element. Don't get me wrong. I love that Hector Hammond should have that. Like it's terrifying. Like I don't want my head to grow to enormous sizes where then I am unable to walk. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
But I just don't like that there were those parallel shots. I feel like there should have been, once again, more to it, because I don't even think Hector and Hal were introduced at that point yet.
No, they the first time they meet is at the party, and by that point, Hector's, I think he's already been infected, because he got infected when Hal does the oath the first time.
Yep. And so if they're not connected and the audience has not connected them, like, why edit it that way? And it just seems, a lot of this movie seems like studio overstep. Like, oh, you got to get that intro in there with the Sector 2814 and all of that. And you got to get this in there, and you've got to.
Well, yeah, and like even like the whole. Although I will say, one of the things I did like is when Hal goes to Carol as Green Lantern, and he's like trying to put on a deep voice and everything, and she goes up, she's like, Hal? And he's like, how'd you know it was me? And she's like, I've seen you naked. Why do you think I wouldn't recognize you just because I can't see your cheekbones?
Yeah, it's an awesome scene.
Yeah.
And I also love that he like immediately calls Tom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he's like, alien found this thing. Like it just makes sense. There's like natural stuff that's happening that, you know, I guess I mean, at this point you did have the I Am Iron Man, right? So you had that moment. So it's kind of, we're slowly moving away from secret identities in these films, and it's not as big a part of things.
Right.
So to have all these playful moments is great, and I think it all works.
Well, it's cool. It's funny too, because you kind of see this, the origins of the Arrowverse in here in some ways too, with like the love interest and the guy in the chair type of thing that Berlanti would use to at first good effect and then to overdone effect in the Arrowverse. And you kind of see the roots of that here with Tom and Carol both being in on the secret pretty much from the jump. Yeah.
Definitely. I Berlanti, I think, you know, did a good job. I just think that I really think there's so much studio involvement. I think, you know, Warner Brothers touts themselves as like, our directors get the final cuts for their movies. But it doesn't seem that way with a lot of DC.
Yeah.
You know, it seems that way with the Nolan movies. Like you can tell, like those Nolan movies, like those feel like a Christopher Nolan film. Joker felt like a Todd, you know what I mean? Like this feels like a Warner Brothers overstep.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that they were trying to have their Iron Man to set up a shared universe here, and you could see that so much with Amanda Waller and Argus. The only reason they're in for this is because they wanted their version of S.H.I.E.L.D. to link this to the rest of the what would have been a DCU. And one of the things that I think they're forgetting is because they were looking at Iron Man, they're like, oh, you know what? What Marvel did is they took this lesser known character and they built this franchise on it. So we should take one of our lesser known characters and build our franchise on it. I'm like, well, yeah, that worked, but that worked because Marvel didn't have the rights to their top tier characters. And also, you know, the Avengers is like, as far as within the Avengers, like Iron Man is one of the top tier characters within the Avengers. Like Green Lantern, he's like, Iron Man's part of the Trinity in the Avengers. Green Lantern is not part of that core of the Justice League in the same way. Like, so you have Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. I can understand not wanting to do Batman and Superman again so soon after the Nolan films and Superman Returns. But then, you know, Wonder Woman would have been a great place to start off with as the first tentpole in your new universe.
Yeah. And I remember joking as Guardians was coming out that like, oh, Marvel's going to have a tree and a talking raccoon beat out Wonder Woman on film. Like, how is that okay? Like,
I remember there was a meme going around at the time where it had the scene of like Jonathan and Clark from Man of Steel, and it said like DC, like the world isn't ready for a Wonder Woman movie, and then it contrasted with Rocket and Groot in the bottom part, like Marvel, like here's a talking raccoon with a gun and his tree friend.
Oh, I don't think I saw that, but that's awesome. Yeah, that's like it was so disappointing to be a DC fan for so long. I feel like with like Green Lantern and then what they did with Man of Steel, like that was really jarring. Like in the, I don't know, something about it in like watching Superman snap the neck. Like I remember looking around at everybody I was with and I was like, did this happen? Are we okay with this? Like I understand it, and like philosophically we've talked it over so many times, and I've talked it over with Anthony so many times that like I'm kind of on board with it for what this is. But to launch what Superman is and do that, I think was where the fault was.
Well, I think all of this is that I think what DC keeps forgetting that worked with Marvel is that it was a shot in the dark. It was like they didn't intend for that. The whole Sam Jackson cameo at the end, that was just supposed to be like a fun little thing to toss in. Like that wasn't they didn't have any intentions of doing the Avengers at that point. They're just kind of like, this is a Hail Mary so we get out of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And it worked. And then they're like, okay, well then I guess we're doing this now.
Yeah, I'm very excited for what James Gunn has upcoming. I'm all on board with his idea of what they're doing, and I feel like they're casting more, like, they have already just cast the engineer from The Authority. So like, I think in this Superman movie you're gonna have like a moment where you see literally every DC character all at once.
Well, yeah, because they mentioned like they cast like Guy Gardner and a bunch of other people in it too, so it feels like they're doing something completely different from what I had initially thought they were going to do. So it's definitely interesting to see. I feel like they're building up to something about like the Superman versus the Elite type of thing with actually having the Authority instead of the Authority stand-ins.
That'd be awesome.
But also I want to talk a little bit about Parallax in this, because I feel like that is one of the biggest missteps here is using Parallax in this movie. It feels, I mean, I understand, you want him in the background maybe because this is how Sinestro gets his fear ring. This is how Hector gets his powers. I'm okay with all that, but you don't then have Parallax be the big threat of this movie. You have Parallax be like the threat in like the third movie in a trilogy.
Yeah. I agree with you there. Like when I was a kid, when I wrote it, I had used like this like D-list Green Lantern villain. I think it was Legion, and it's basically these tiny robots that form one giant robot. And like out of nowhere, following Abin Sur, like as soon as he gets the ring, Legion came in and like swept Hal away. You have this threat that's like terrifying, right? That like he can't handle, that's like completely alien. But yeah, Parallax is world ending. That is like, that is a Thanos level threat. It is existentially a threat to Hal's in like who he is, because he gets possessed by this thing.
Yeah.
And he throws it into the sun at the end of the first movie. Like one of his biggest threats.
Yeah, I feel like maybe that was Jeff Johns like putting his hand in and saying like, we're not having Hal go crazy in this world.
Yeah.
But which, now that I think about it, I think that would have actually been pretty interesting if you build up to this, like if you build up to this threat and then have like Hal go crazy in the third movie, and then you completely flip audience expectations and you have to bring in a new Green Lantern then.
That's what I wanted to do with my versions. But like watching that scene once again with his family and that kid, I was like sitting there and like, I guess, I don't know, like a sociopath, I was like, oh my God, imagine how many people you could hurt if you just like got rid of them.
Yeah.
Like you set up this scene and you've like revolved so much of him saving them around this, that once you take them away, like that, you can understand how he would break.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that would also drive home that idea of like the whole overcoming fear aspect, right? If he succumbs to that fear like that and, realizes that he can't do this by himself, like that would have really helped to drive those messages from. And instead it does feel like, like you said, the whole idea of overcoming fear is really kind of suppressed or is just given lip service. And it's not really, for all we talk about, for all us writers hear about, and my son obviously agrees with me. But for all we hear about, this idea of, as writers, we're always told, show, don't tell. Like this movie does a lot of telling and not a lot of showing.
Yeah. It's just Parallax really seems shoved in. I don't know. I know they did reshoots, because Warner Brothers movies tend to do extensive reshoots all the time, because they have so many executives involved for some reason, and they just don't let the creative teams breathe, which I hope is happening with these James Gunn movies, because he seems to even be in charge of like when things are released.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I mean, like I've got a lot of faith in Gunn, because he seems to have, and I think he's shown this really well with the Guardians movies, is that he seems to be able to resist kind of like Marvel's worst impulses, and whereas like he'll do stuff and he'll I mean I'm always blown away in how well the CGI is executed in the Guardians movies compared to some of the other ones, and the reason is because he doesn't go in with the attitude of we'll fix it in post with CGI. He sets up CGI deliberately in his shots and like this is how we're going to use it. He plans it very well in advance, and I feel like he does the same thing with most of these movies too, and he's very good at focusing on what's really important and not getting distracted by the larger universe stuff. So I think he's got a pretty good handle on it at DC. Although hoping that Zaslav doesn't step in and screw things up like he is with everything else.
Yeah, and I think that's what worries me about Warner Brothers as a company when it comes to this stuff, because they don't even know that they have this, like, all of the properties that Warner Brothers has could like bury Marvel films if handled correctly.
Yes.
And even I feel like I know the Batman did well, but I don't think it did as well as Batman 89 or like the Nolan movies. I love that movie, but once again, like Warner Brothers, like they have too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to the higher level.
Yes.
There.
Yeah. Well, I think too one of the problems is that, and probably one of the reasons why the Batman maybe didn't do as well as some of those other films, is because I think maybe a lot of audiences, they went in and they're thinking like, wait, you're bringing in another Batman now? This is like what, the third one now? So I feel like there's kind of a sense among most of the audience that, all right, this doesn't seem, who knows how long this is going to stick around. So maybe we should just sit this one out until we see if it develops any legs under it.
Yeah. So I once again love all the Oa stuff. Parallax is way too much at the end there. How did you know where Hector was?
That was what I wrote down in my notes too. That is just completely out of nowhere. Just all of a sudden, Hal bursts in with I'm like, wait, did I? And I remember because we had planned to record this last month originally, and so I'd watched it then too, and I had dozed off watching it. So I'm like, wait, I think I missed a scene. And I'm like, oh, I'll check it up later on Wikipedia. And I checked in the plot summary on Wikipedia. I'm like, doesn't seem like I missed a scene. And then I was rewatching it last night. I'm like, nope, I'm wide awake. I did not miss anything. There is no reason why Hal should know about any of this happening.
Yeah, he like crashes into an Amanda Waller secret location.
Yeah,
like, that should be like Batman levels of off the map. Like you should not know wherever this place is.
It's a plot hole that, just like in Dark Knight Rises, how Bruce suddenly goes from the middle of nowhere in this prison with no money, and all of a sudden he ends up back in Gotham, which has been cut off from the rest of the country.
Yeah. But see, what Green Lantern doesn't have, that Batman does have, is that like it's Batman.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Which, I don't give too much credence to that, but that's like
audiences are willing to go with that. Yeah,
exactly. You can go with it's Batman for Batman, but you can't go with like, oh, it's Green Lantern.
Yeah.
What, the Ring whispered to him? What? There's nothing. You wouldn't know. Oh, and you could have even said in that scene with like Carol, oh, there's a weird energy disturbance that seems like, yellow energy, and then go. But no, they didn't even do that. He just like flies in and he's like, Hector.
Yeah, it's just, and also just the CGI, the decision to make the suit all CGI was, I think, at the time I thought, oh, that's cool. That sounds interesting. But seeing what came out of it, it's very clear the CGI was not at that level yet. And I think, and again, I think they were looking at Iron Man as too much of an example, where they looked at Iron Man where, a lot of those scenes with the armor are CGI, but they mixed it with actual practical suit effects too. They didn't do all CGI all the time. And that was a big weakness, because you watch this movie and it just, there are times when some of these scenes, it looks like a PS2 cutscene.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was looking after watching it while I was sitting here, I've been playing Mario RPG too, so I was kind of like playing the new Mario RPG and then like Googling fan edits of the suit. And I don't think anything works because I don't think the original suit would work, right? I
Yeah.
don't think the classic green with the white gloves, I don't think that'll work.
Yeah.
I don't think that any of the fan edits I've seen have worked. I definitely don't think the movie scene suit works. I saw the Jon Stewart for Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I was like, okay, that kind of works. But it's a hard thing to translate.
I think the thing that I think would work probably is that Jon Stewart suit from the Justice League TV show. That's the animated series. I think that's the one where it's mostly black and you've got some of the green accents. I think that's really the only way to really make it work. And you can't make the green too bright, I think, too, because otherwise that would it looks very distracting. Like the brightness of that green, it's green. It's really green.
Yeah. I mean, even Taika is like, oh, green.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking for all of us there. But honestly, too, I don't think you need a mask. Like, I think that mask is not really helping things at all.
No, and I don't think the secret identity is necessary if you're a space cop.
No, yeah. I mean, I think if you're doing the secret identity thing, you could obviously deal with it with the fact that he's surrounded by bright green aura anyway, so his face is kind of obscured by that. So I don't think you really need much more than that to really get across the secret identity thing.
Absolutely. We haven't talked about any of his like power usages. I mean, he does all of the classic Hal stuff. There's like, I don't think anything was like left out of like what Hal is able to think of, down to the fact that he doesn't even know how to call his ring to him because it's Hal Jordan. He's that inept. But like,
yeah, I thought at the party, like using the car and the racetrack, I thought that was a pretty, maybe far more creative than Hal does in the comics, but I thought that was a pretty cool use of it.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job with like showcasing the powers. I think that all like plays well, and I think that the scenes on Oa, like I'm in on those, even though like the CGI isn't fantastic. I'm still like into those scenes. And
well, I mean,
like,
I
how
think the swords that him and Sinestro generated, I thought those looked pretty cool. Like they were like real swords. They had kind of like this like ethereal effect to it. I thought they worked pretty well.
Yeah, and you get the boxing glove.
But yeah, I thought the constructs were pretty well done. Janky CGI. I mean, you expect them; they're going to look unrealistic anyway, no matter how good the CGI is, just by nature of what they are. So I think they worked pretty well for the most part. The constructs, I got no complaint with. It's just the suit in general being all CGI like that just doesn't work, and like the weird muscle texture on it too was also kind of an odd choice. I felt like they trying to it felt like almost similar to like the logic behind the nipples on the bat suits in the Schumacher films. Like, it doesn't have to be this anatomically correct.
Yeah, I didn't. The feet made me uncomfortable. Have you gotten like a good look at like how they're like molded around?
Yeah,
his foot?
that was weird. And also like the way that it doesn't feel like, like Carol says, like, why is your skin green? I'm just like, so wait, he's basically naked. That is what you're telling me here. This feels weird now.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just, I didn't also like that you would see like it looked like energy was coming from the suit through the ring.
Yeah,
it didn't look like it was coming from the ring, which I know is like such a like too over the top nerd thing of me to like complain about, but like, why does it look like it's coming from the like little power battery in the center of the suit through his arm then to the ring?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I didn't really think about that too much, but yeah, that's very true. And I feel like this is another case of the Iron Man influence coming in, because you've got this big glowy thing in the center of the chest. The power's going to come from there.
Oh, right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
But it is also important to note, as much as a disappointment as this film was, I mean, back at the time, it could have been a lot worse because some of the other things that Warner Brothers was tossing around in the development stages, like you know about the Jack Black version that they were working on for a while, right?
I do remember the rumblings of that.
Yeah, so there's for anyone who doesn't know, there was talk about, I can't remember what the screenwriter was, but there was one screenwriter who was talking about how they were hired to write Green Lantern for Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers' concept behind it was that it would have been a comedy film starring either Jack Black himself or like a Jack Black type actor. And it would have been like, the whole idea is that the Ring makes a mistake and finds the wrong person. And instead of finding like this capable hero, it ends up finding this like total slacker. And like the climax of the movie would have been like the Jack Black character basically redoing the ending from Superman 78, where he creates like a Green Lantern version of Superman to fly back in time and solve the problem.
Oh my God. I didn't hear about that ending.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was also like they're even like back in the 80s too, there were rumblings about doing it still as a comedy, but with like Eddie Murphy involved.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's crazy. Man, it just shows how Warner Brothers just doesn't understand the property.
No, I mean this isn't a Warner Brothers thing, but it does remind me of when James O'Barr was talking about his initial meetings with producers for The Crow, and he was sitting in this room with a bunch of Hollywood executives, and one of them said, like, I got it. We can do this as a musical. We can get Michael Jackson to play the lead role, and it'll be great. And then O'Barr just starts bursting out into laughter because he thought the guy was making a joke. And then he realizes he's the only one laughing, and everybody's looking at him like he's crazy.
I was at a Comic-Con party out in San Diego Comic-Con, and I was hanging out with a couple people from Warner, and one of them said, tomorrow we're announcing Sandman. And this was 10 years ago, so this is before the show. So this is one of the many dead Sandman projects.
Right.
And he goes, we figured it out. Sandman's going to be our next Harry Potter. And I was like, and I'm like, I don't know, because I don't want to be mean, right? I don't it's not when I'm hanging out with people, it's not my initial reaction to be like, that's dumb, or like to just do that. I was just like, oh, okay. And I remember talking to my friend afterwards and just like spiraling and being like, what are they thinking? Oh my God.
Although, being mean can sometimes benefit. That's how Kevin Smith got the Superman Lives screenwriting job, right?
That is fair.
They asked him what do you think of the script? He's like, it's shit. He's like, who wrote this? Did you pay for this? Can you get your money back? Did somebody's cousin write this? And it's like each day he bring him back in. It's like, tell him what you told me, until finally he gets up to Lorenzo, and then he gives, and then Lorenzo's the first one says, well, what else would you do differently?
Yeah. Man, at least I remember it very clearly. So if like at the end of life we can go back to like prior save points, it's definitely a save point in my head where I can be like, I could go and change that reality. But man, I remember I was just like, oh God, is this how it all works?
Mm-hmm. Now, kind of the last thing to talk about is kind of the future. So we got teased Green Lantern a bunch through the Arrowverse, right? With the whole idea that John Diggle might be John Stewart, and then we kind of got that confirmed when we met his father, and then he finds what looks like the Green Lantern ring at the conclusion of Arrow, but then it just turns out it's not. I guess I can't really remember how that shook out. It was weird, but and then there was supposed to be like the HBO Max series that ended up getting canceled, and now there's the DC Universe. They said they're going to be doing a new TV show called Lanterns, and it's going to be starring Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. But then we're also going to have Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner in Superman Legacy. So what's kind of your take on all that kind of stuff that's been floating around there?
I love the direction that it's going in. I love that you're including Jon Stewart with Hal. I remember when the movie was coming out, there was this big backlash, and they were like, Green Lantern's not white. Mm-hmm. And like, as someone who read the comics, I was like, what are you talking about?
Well, I remember that was,
of course, Hal is like,
yeah. I remember that was Neil Adams' big thing too, because he said at the time, he was saying, why would you do Green Lantern with Hal Jordan when an entire generation knows him as Jon Stewart?
Yeah. And like, to me, like that completely changed my perspective once I saw like people only knew Jon Stewart.
Mhm.
Like no one knew Hal, no one knew Kyle because of the cartoon. That is the Green Lantern you know.
Yeah.
And like so it's complete it's brilliant to have them both there, right?
Mhm.
You now have two of these characters. Um am I holding out hope for a Kyle? Always.
Yeah.
Like just I just think that is where, like, you know, he is the Luke Skywalker of the Green Lantern story, and Hal will always be the Darth Vader to me.
Well, yeah, I think that was what works so well about Kyle, because if the whole theme is overcoming fear, then having a character who's fearless is kind of working against you right there from the start. But having a character who is always like second guessing himself, who's very unsure of himself, I think is a perfect character to have in that role.
Yeah. And I love Jon Stewart as well, just how his mind works with the ring and how like everything is so detailed, and he brings his like, you know, architect, and he brings his military and like that with Hal then, who is like, you have Jon Stewart basically, I'm assuming, is going to be like the like straight guy, and then Hal's going to be like the one who's kind of off the handle, I would assume, with that partnership.
Yeah,
know,
it'll be interesting to see. What do you think about Fillion as Guy Gardner then?
I mean, that's perfect, and I'm very excited for James Gunn to put him in an orange bowl cut.
Has he said that he'll give him the bowl cut?
He's made a joke about it, but I don't know if that's going to be a serious thing.
I mean, yeah, because Fillion did a lot of voice work for Hal in the animated movies, and I thought he did a great job as Hal in those. And I'm just like, yeah, if someone's going to get me interested in Hal Jordan outside of Ryan Reynolds, it would probably be Nathan Fillion. But having him as Guy, I think, is even better, because he can definitely bring that cockiness to that role.
Absolutely. Did you see the newer origin for Jon Stewart with Beware My Power?
No, not yet.
It's really good. I think they do a really good job of like kind of giving him a very like almost a similar kind of background to Hal, but like instead of it being from Abin Sur, it's kind of coming from Hal, and I think it was just a really like well done way to kind of flesh out Jon Stewart's backstory a little bit, stronger.
Yeah, I've got that, so I am curious to check out that, because I also see that Green Arrow is a big player in that too, and I love me some Green Arrow, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. But this was a fun conversation, Ralph. Thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed talking about this movie and finding some good things to say, and also some things, not so good things to say about it.
I know. I really wish I could have defended it a lot more, but I came away not feeling great about it, not feeling bad about it, just kind of feeling bored about it.
Yeah.
Which, after all of this time, like having such strong feelings towards it, to now have no feelings towards it it's a strange feeling. I do have one more thing on my notes that I want to bring up.
Oh, though. Sure. Absolutely.
And it's when Kilowog goes, "Can I train him or what?" And I was just like, for all of the 5 minutes, Kilowog, you did a great job.
Yeah, Michael Clark Duncan, R.I.P. Man, he was a great one. Also a great Kingpin too. Like up until we got Vincent D'Onofrio, he was like, I thought like if they bring anyone back, they should bring back him as Kingpin.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this was fun. If you have anything you'd like to promote, please go ahead and tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as @Ralph Puma. All of my links are there. You can find my music. You can find Solace. You can find my weird explaining the occult via, how conservatives have infiltrated politics in weird ways. Mini doc called Satan Mania.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
All of the strange things I work on, and all of the podcasts I'm on with Anthony as well. You can find all on that link tree that's on the Ralph Puma Instagram. Go check out my music. Go check out my show. That's all I got.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we'll have links to that stuff in the show notes. As for us, we are superherocinephiles.com is the website. We are Super Cinema Pod on Blue Sky and Instagram. We're also on Threads. I'm not sure. I think it's also Super Cinema Pod on Threads as well. Technically, we have a Twitter page, but now that Elon Musk has completely come out and gone full Nazi, I'm not going to be over there really at all anymore. So you could better find me on Blue Sky or Threads. And, contact me through the webpage if you want. Also, don't forget, we've got the comic book, Paragons of Earth, that I've done with Thomas DJ and Eric Johns. By the time this episode comes out, hopefully the funding will be completed, but you'll still be able to pick it up. So you can check that out at crowdfunder.com/paragonscomic. That's crowdfunder, no e.com/paragonscomic. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine, with the support of Zencastr. The show is created by myself and the late great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. You can also support us by visiting crowdfunder.com/paragonscomic. That's crowdfunder with no e.com/paragonscomic, and help support my superhero comic book, Paragons of Earth. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.